Oh, sorry. Sorry, all you people out there. I had you muted. Okay, we're in it together. All right. All right. So let me see here. All right. So post-commodity, here's this statement of practice, which is really 2 run-on sentences. That was the best we could muster. But we wrote this in 2007 and have lived with it ever since. And I think it still holds up. And I read this to you because it's like the shortest manifesto ever written, maybe. And it's still relevant to us. And I think it's relevant to the wake we've created over the last 15 years or so through our art practice. Post-commodities art functions as a shared indigenous lens and voice to engage the assaultive manifestations of the global market and its supporting institutions, public perceptions, beliefs, and individual actions that comprise the ever-expanding multinational, multiracial, and multi-ethnic colonizing force that is defining the 21st century through ever-increasing velocities and complex forms of violence. Post-commodity works to forge new metaphors capable of rationalizing our shared experiences within this increasingly challenging contemporary environment, to promote a constructive discourse that challenges the social, political, and economic processes that are destabilizing communities and geographies, and connect indigenous narratives of cultural self-determination with the broader public sphere. Post-commodity, I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of previous members, co-founder Stephen Yazzie, co-founder Nathan Young, and Raven Chacon. It was a joy working with all 3 of these talented artists. Raven Chacon recently won a Pulitzer Prize for one of his compositions. Just the kind of people I got to rub elbows with. It was really sweet. Highly encourage that. Starting a collective so you can hang out with artists you like. Why post-commodity? This is like one of the questions we get asked a lot. So I thought I would intervene and just get out in front of it and give you 7 bullet points and talk through them a little bit. First and foremost, we wanted to build an indigenous learning community, an interdisciplinary learning community. Originally, Nathan was a filmmaker, Yazzie was a painter, and I was a really bad video installation artist. Still am. But we wanted to learn how to do what everyone else was doing, but then we wanted together to learn things that neither one of us knew. And 3 dumb people like feeling around in the dark together, it actually gives each of us courage to do things that we didn't think we could do. When you're working with people who are chasing after a shared goal, you drag yourself into learning things that you would never think you're capable of doing, just because you're supported, you feel safe, comfortable, and you're working towards a common goal. So that was, first and foremost, that's what we wanted to do. And I think that is something we probably did better than anything else. The other point is to shift contemporary American Indian or indigenous arts discourses away from the market and its problematic expectations and demands. Growing up in the United States, we have Santa Fe, and that place is a hellhole. And it's a place where Indians go to die. Their work dies, their souls die, their spirits die. It gets chewed up, commodified by the market. And then next thing you know, when you're actually physically dead, a bunch of white people own your intellectual property. Scary place, scary thing, but that's been the history of contemporary American Indian art. Now up here in Canada, y'all were really fortunate because the art market isn't the sole determiner of reality in the arts. You know, up here, artists tend to work outside of the gallery, work with institutions on grants, So the work tends to be very much discourse first, idea driving the practice. In the US, it's like, let's just take a gun and just shoot somewhere in a dark place until something works. And then you'll try to make as much money as you can off it. It's kind of, that's what graduate schools do with their students. They want students to meet the market upon graduation, and we wanted to change that, at least from an Indian context. And while we have sold a couple, I think we've sold 5 or 6 artworks in the 15 years we've been together. It's nice to not have a gallery-driven practice. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want, how we want. And there's a lot of freedom in that. And I think that position comes with having a collective and having multiple people sitting at a table and negotiating, with board members, curators, and so forth. It's different when you're the one who's outnumbered. The conversation is totally different. When you're outnumbering the administrators of an institution, it's sobering. There's a level of honesty and to the conversation that you just don't get otherwise. And we've tried to really capitalize on that. And in many ways, we're just trying to do stuff that many Canadian artists Indian artists were doing before us. I always wanted to be Rebecca Belmore, and I still can't make work as good as she can, or not as smart as she is, or not as, good looking, but, she's a giant and has really provided a lot of aspiration, I think, for all of us. But she's just one example of many artists working up here. So the other thing we wanted to do is move beyond the simplistic binaries of us versus them. That's really problematic. When you're non-white, everything you do is contextualized in its relationship to whiteness. And everything you do is presenting a potential contentious conflict in opposition to, what we call in the United States, white supremacy. That's tough. It's really tough. And so you look at the history of Indian art in its modern and contemporary forms, and you find so many narratives and so many discourses of Indians versus white, so many trauma narratives, so many brutal things that really empower that conflict between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. We just wanted to move out of that. And because a lot of that work creates self-reflexive work. It's like in a lot of Indian art, self-portraits. They're reflecting their aesthetic, culture, and values and themselves in the work so often. And not as often, let's point the camera out at the world. And as Indian people, let's make Indian art by how we're commenting, analyzing a cause and effect relationship. I mean, that's what art is, right? We're just providing analysis on cause and effect relationships. So we wanted to get that out of us versus them and focus on implicating ourselves, because we as Indigenous people are also consumers. And we're living in a 21st century world that's driven by consumerism. And our power, our authority, our reality, our perceptions are venerated through the ways in which we consume. So we wanted to get on that thing, because the other stuff, us versus them, yeah, that still exists today. That's never going to go away. But people have been commenting on it for hundreds of years. So we figured, why not just look at the world and comment on it, from the sidelines in a way. So that's what we've tried to do with our work. So you won't find big Indian signifiers in our work. There's no leather, feathers, or those types of things. And some people would say that it doesn't look at all like in Indians who are involved in its making. Another thing we wanted to do is challenge the contemporary assumption about art assumption about authorship and individualism and individual genius. Part of Postcommodity was taking on the Enlightenment project and really interrogating this concept of individualism. Anybody who works in the arts know that there's no project that's really delivered by an individual. It's largely collaborative, especially when you're exhibiting in a museum or an institution. You have a team of preparators who are often better than the artists that they're setting the work up for. There you have them, you have the exhibition designers, you have the curators, you have the board members, you have all the staff that all have a hand in the work. It wouldn't be what it is without that level of cooperation, collaboration, and, shared sense of purpose. So I think that idea, there's no individual in that process. We wanted to get away from that, and nothing confuses, arts institutions like a collective or a grant-making institution like a collective. Like, we got a creative capital grant and they couldn't even make it out to Postcommodity. They didn't know what to do. It had to go to an individual, all the grants to the individual. So the contracting, we had to form an LLC so that we could contract and move away from that. Every time we show an institution, we have to educate the institution about collectives and about how this works and what we're aiming to do. So that's been really fun. And then, one of my goals, because I'm really, I was probably the poorest of the group at the time of inception, because I was in between jobs at the time. And there's nothing like working on art when you're broke and don't have a job. There's nothing else to do. It kind of keeps you alive. But we wanted to achieve something greater than the sum of its individual parts. Emerging artists in the room, any students? Okay, let's say you apply for a project grant, it's $5,000. You do it by yourself, that's $5,000. But if you have 4 people working with that $5,000, it's closer to $20,000. Because you have the labor of 4 people, you have the skill set, knowledge of 4 people, you have the relationships that they have externally. It leads to, greater capacity, greater opportunity to create work that we weren't able to do as individuals. And I think that was a real critical aspect, was just to acknowledge our limitations. We were at the bottom of the food chain in the art world, and in many respects still are. But we weren't getting grants, we weren't getting budgets. So we decided to DIY it and put our resources all together. And this goes to the next part, is leveraging knowledge, skill sets, and interests, resources and capacities to create, large scale work that we wouldn't have the opportunity to produce as individual artists. Really, really, those 5 and 6 are tightly related there. And 7 was to really be ambitious. And it's so much easier to be ambitious with a collective than as an individual, especially I think this might be a cultural thing, because I think Anglo people are disciplined to be ambitious by themselves because they are products of the Enlightenment project. It's in their teaching and their ways of being, and it's in their belief systems and practices. But for Indian people, it's really hard to go out and do something for individual valor. If you're doing something and working towards something that is bigger than you, like a collective, it's much easier. It takes that burden off. I still hate to promote, like, I got a solo show coming up in February, and I'm not even talking to people about it because I feel creepy doing that, But with Postcommodity, I'll talk about Postcommodity all day because there's other people involved. So I think that was really why, why we chose to form a collective. And this was the first work, Repellent Fence. This was the first work we conceptualized. We talked about it in 2006 before we even formed, Stephen Yazzie and myself. It all started with, this is modeled after a repellent bird product that you hang in a tree and, scare eye balloon that you get it at a hardware store. It'll scare away birds for a couple days, and then it'll be covered in bird shit in a couple weeks. And, but the thing that we noticed was, well, speaking of signifiers, this is a round thing. This is an abstracted open eye, which is an iconography used by a lot of indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. It's an iconography that demonstrates a connectedness throughout the hemisphere since time immemorial. And we wanted to do something with that. And we imagined, well, if it doesn't work on birds, it won't work on immigrants as a scare eye. So we brought that kind of sense of irony and playfulness and seriousness also to this work. So we started conceptualizing in 2006. It finally got exhibited in 2015. Totally self-produced and financed, and we raised all the money, and we spent 8 years doing public affairs work along the border, trying to find the right community to site this work. And one of the things we were looking for is a memorandum of understanding between two cities on opposite sides of the border that address something other than just public safety. Because most of the, they have these memorandums of understanding between governments for public safety because of the trafficking of people, drugs, and things like that across the border. So all the MOUs are really just about that one thing. But after 5 years, we found Douglas and Agua Prieta. They had a memorandum of understanding that laid out clearly a social policy that extended the idea of sharing people and resources and capacities across the border for education, for healthcare, for the arts, and so on. So those two cities had been sharing infrastructure for a number of years, supported by an MOU. That was a place to do this. That spirit of wanting to cooperate across that border, of wanting to reconnect a community that was once one community, that the fence divided, that the war on drug divided. So that was this special Goldilocks zone, you might say, for doing a piece. There's already a cooperative document in space, and that mandates and provides a conceptual framework for cooperation and collaboration across borders. And then going there and hanging out with people. Our first community meeting, we probably had 30 people, most of which were from Agua Prieta, the other side of the border, trying to come over and be a part of it. They had a built-in organizational infrastructure. And a friend of mine that went to school with at Arizona State University, Janae Sanchez, well, she lived there, and she's kind of like, her and her husband were kind of like unofficial mayors of that town. They ran a cafe where all the politicians would sit and talk every morning. So they knew everything. So we did all the organizing in their cafe in the Mexican consulate. And next thing you know, critical mass, and the communities are doing the work. They're doing all the emailing. They're doing all the logistics. They're doing everything. And it's one of those things where you have enough, you spend enough time in an area and you're working on an issue that means something to people. And you have this shared goal. And if you feed that, at some point, there's all of those layers of shared contexts and shared goals and desires, they kind of take on the sovereignty, of themselves, where nothing can get in your way, nothing can stop it. And that's what happened with the project. We actually moved about $180,000 worth of hazmat, material across the border, because helium is a hazmat gas. We got it through a port of entry that didn't allow hazmat to go through that port of entry. That's the sovereignty of context. People wanted it to go through so they could override the limitations of 2 federal governments, 2 state governments. That's what 2 cities did. And that's probably the thing we realized the most from this project is when people want to be together, nothing's going to stop them. If people want to be generative together, nothing's going to get in the way. And our goal was to build something across the border. And we were told by the community that what it is it's not a fence going across the border. It's not some conceptual bullshit. These are like sutures stitching the land and the people together. And that was a kind of attitude that came from the communities we were working with. And that's why the piece happened. I don't know what else to say about it. It was really a glorious moment. And here's a short video for you all to see some of this. Some aerial footage. While Stephen Yazzie left the collective, right? He had 2 children. His wife wouldn't let him be in the collective anymore because we were traveling a lot in those days. And we still are very, very close with him. He shot all this footage. He now has a video production company. And so we're able to loop him into the project. And he's the only one who made money on the project because he got paid to shoot the video. And we laughed about that, but it was really fun to keep your relations, Another really powerful experience with this, one of the reasons why we did the piece was to try to shift the discourse around borders, to acknowledge that the people coming here are indigenous people due to a human rights crisis, due to US intervention since the 50s into Central America, South America, and Mexico. And The US government's really rendered a lot of communities in, Mexico, South Central America is no longer sustainable. And so we have thousands upon thousands of indigenous people crossing this border, but they're not acknowledged by their tribes, by their languages, by their names. They're just called illegal, or they're called Mexican. And it's funny because even Guatemalans are called Mexican, or Salvadorians or Venezuelans, they're just called Mexican. So there's this term in the United States, that term Mexican is such a totalizing word and such a dismissive, violent term. We just wanted to shift that discourse, just to acknowledge these are indigenous people, this is tribal land, it's indigenous land, that we've been crossing north-south since time immemorial. We've been trading. This iconography exists from Canada to, the point of South America because we've been trading for that long. We deserve to be humanized, not dehumanized. And the indigenous people that are coming across deserve to be honored. It was amazing how many people would come up to us in the group working on this on the Mexico side in Sonora, telling us about their tribal backgrounds. Mestizo people that typically would never, ever say out loud that they're Indian. They would. So amazing. Sorry, I don't know what you're saying, Chantel. Talking to this? Got enough of that, right? All right. Beautiful experience. First, that's why we organized Postcommodity, was for that piece. That was it. We didn't know that we'd do other things. We also didn't know that it would take 8 years to do it. We thought we could just go down there with some balloons. Oh, you can't do that. But what supported it was Border Patrol. They supported it. The cartels, they supported it. We went through a major trafficking place that where the cartels gave us that chunk of land to use for a week. We had 1 week to use it. And they provided security. Yeah. And one other thing about this. We're talking 8 years of working, no contracts. Not a single contract was signed. It was all face-to-face, old school. That shit still works today. All right. Okay, this is a piece called Going to Water. This is a multi-channel video installation with sound. It depicts the Owens Valley. It's located east of the Sierra Mountains. Indigenous people have long converged in this area to trade and to socialize. Because of this huge drainage lake that forms every year. The nearby Paiute tribes of Bishop, Lone Pine, call the valley Paiahuandi. Sorry, I'm not Paiute, so I probably totally butchered that. Or a place of flowing water. Now, have you all seen Chinatown, with Jack Nicholson? It was about this. It was about diverting water from Owens Lake to Los Angeles. Los Angeles was growing, so in the early 1900s, the city of Los Angeles Water and Power District constructed an aqueduct and diverted water south over 300 kilometers. Of course, this caused Owens Lake to go dry by 1926 and devastating the valley's ecosystem. This is a common problem we have in the Southwest, lakes drying up, and the fine silt earth that's left behind filled with carcinogens. Wind takes that into the air, holds it in the atmosphere, and we breathe it in. And as a result, this area, the Owens Valley, has the highest rates of cancer in the US. And really horrible place, beautiful place, horrible condition caused from Los Angeles. I bring this here because, you know, I live in LA and I drink the water that was, you know, that LA Water and Power provides for us. And I'm complicit in this. I'm just as guilty as anyone else in this thing. And it's devastating. But what happened was there's an intergovernmental agency of state, federal, and tribal governments that operate a surveillance system of the land for clean air and clean water mitigation and management. And there's 22 cameras that point at this valley at different parts of it and monitor the wind, share the data, and things like that. So we thought that was a really beautiful collaborative process, because usually tribes are left out of those things. And we really thought this was something that would be a beautiful ready-made to bring into a museum space. So we found the windiest day in the year of between 2020 and the first half of 2021. And it was February 10th, I believe. And we downloaded the videos from that camera, from all the cameras, and looped them and played them. And then we composed this piece. But it's interesting because this time of year, so many people see this area because everyone from LA is driving up to Mammoth to go snowboard. It's about a 4-hour drive, and it's on through the Eastern Sierras. And you're talking 14,000 feet peaks on one side, 12,000 foot peaks on the other side. And you're driving through this narrow valley for miles and miles and miles. And you're driving through the Owens Valley. So every year, thousands and thousands and thousands of ski tourists and so forth interact with this. I do that a lot. I love to ski and snowboard. So I'm just reminded of this history and this devastation every time I hit the road to go ski. And so is Chantel now. She gets to see that all the time too. But wanted to capture that and bring it into this space. And here's a quick video of the piece at work with some sound. Oops. There it goes. Cristobal on the trombone. Right. All right. This is a piece, this is the sculpture I was referring to. This is a truck hunting near Agua Caliente Reservation. This was, this and the piece before were commissioned by the Remai Modern and included in our exhibition there called Time Holds All the Answers. It was curated by Gerald McMaster, and is the best art experience of my life for sure. And Cristobal the same way. It's really wonderful being on the prairies, and Saskatoon is really a killer town. That, I don't know if any of you all have been to that museum, but it is just a phenomenally beautiful space, and work just pops there. So it was the greatest honor of my life to get to work in a space like that with a team of preparators, and to go at it. And we developed some work that we were really, really pleased with. And this is one of them. I'm showing this work because this is another part of the California history is tribal lands versus development opportunities, versus tribes and their development opportunities versus their own people and versus a larger Palm Springs community. There's so many contentious, I should say, so many contested spaces within the Palm Springs area. And this piece is a part of American history, you might think. After World War II, America thought it was the greatest country in the world. It went around telling people what to do and so forth. And well, it was a time to build. After World War II, we built our interstate system and we built up the cities to accommodate it. And, a lot of small towns and so forth grew into towns through suburban development. But before all that happened, there was a serious question about how to achieve economy of scale and mass development. And in the 50s, was it 1954, there was a wonderful event that took place in the Palm Springs area where a number of architects were commissioned to develop homes that they thought would be fine candidates for achieving economies of scale. And some of the things that they were after were, modularity and openness, so that the small living spaces would seem bigger, and light, because that makes small spaces seem bigger. And this idea of indoor-outdoor living, of having the backyard, the barbecue grill, and the pool and everything like that. So it was a lifestyle that was really a post-World War II lifestyle that was, I think, embodied within, I think it was the aspirations of a generation that were embodied in this architecture. And one of the, Wexler was one of the architects, and this roof line that we have here is part of that iconic zigzag butterfly roof line designed by Donald Wexler. And we think of it as very symbolic of the larger mid-century modern movement, like iconographic. And it's iconographic. People are so obsessed with mid-century modern architecture for good reason. It creates really comfortable spaces if you're an adult. Really tough on kids, all those sharp angles and concrete. But I guess the people didn't have kids. They were anticipating today, where no one has children. But what they were wanting to do is build a box that would look good from any direction, so that they could place it, map it out, and grid it and develop it. And so they were looking for these architectural features that could provide some sense of like, oh, that doesn't look too bad. And this was one of those things. It's like, oh man, that doesn't look too bad. Let's put it on top of the house. That's our new roof line, like that. I'm just kidding, being humorous there, but we imagined ourselves like truck hunting. Anybody deer hunt like out of a truck besides me? We were imagining ourselves truck hunting, and we're coming up on these housing developments. It's like let's get the skill saw and cut the top off of that damn house, throw it in the back of the truck, and let's go home and taxidermy that sumbitch and hang it. And that's really what we wanted to do. We thought we were this is like a taxidermy of the Judeo-Christian Western scientific worldview as it meets the American Southwest and becomes the largest, most vast wasteland of hideous commercial development, which necessitated the draining, the misappropriation of so many natural resources and the destruction of environments. And to this day, California still has more endangered species than any other state in the United States. We have a wasteland and what used to be a California dream. So the reality is really brutal. Just like in Going to Water, it's somber, sad on purpose. It's a nightmare that has happened. And we'll never get that desert land back. We'll never get the suburban land back. We're now just building more, and it's incentivized this, local government dependency on development dollars for taxation. So we have almost every city in the West is dependent upon development dollars for its sustainability. And this is that symbol for us. And I want to report, this is one of the 6 pieces that has sold. Someone believes in it, but it's roughly 20 feet by 20 feet. And it sure was fun to build, and really fun piece. But all right, last piece. Point of final collapse. Does anyone know about the Millennium Tower in San Francisco? Sinking, tilting. It's sinking like a foot a year. And right now it's about 22 inches into the ground, and it's tilting about 16 inches. It still has people living in it. It's still the most valuable property in San Francisco. Joe Montana lives there. He's got a badass TV. He's a football player, Joe Montana. He played for the San Francisco 49ers, quarterback. He lives there in that building. But that's an artist rendering of the building, like an architectural rendering that we commissioned an architect to do for us. The original architect wouldn't take our calls. But it is tilting, and it is sinking into the ground, and it is a danger to the public. But how it got built was a quasi-public private entity called the Trans-Bay Authority lobbied the city and counties of San Francisco to raise the height restrictions on buildings. This is built on sand. It's mud infill from the bay. There's no bedrock underneath that. And the reason why it's sinking is because they didn't anchor it to any bedrock. Oh, and it's like super heavy because it's concrete. It's the tallest concrete building west of the Mississippi. They put it on infill in a place that has lots of earthquakes, big ones, And then what's cool is like Salesforce built one there, and so did Meta or Facebook. So there's like these 3 giant towers. It's like a pissing contest. Who's taller or bigger or has more girth or whatever. They're all looking at it, So we thought it was a perfect metaphor for for neoliberalism, for where we're at in this capitalist world that is the US. I'm out of the US now. So our capitalism, this is what we believe is a really strong metaphor for both its strengths and weaknesses. And You know, we also thought it was a metaphor too for the anxiety that exists in San Francisco. You have the highest rent in the United States. You have all these tech bros who came in, killed the arts and the music scene, killed the food scene. God knows what they do with themselves in their free time. I guess play video games, but that city's dead. I don't know if any of you went to San Francisco in the 80s or 90s and then went back, and it's like, holy shit, what happened here? It's gentrified beyond the term, what the term can handle. And it creates an anxiety. Of course, the labor that goes into that economy is driven by anxiety and threat. Tech workers face layoffs every single year. My brother is a tech worker. Every year for the past 17 years, he's been on the layoff list. Could you imagine living like that every single year? So it's just an anxiety of the economy, of that place. And then we have this sinking, tilting tower that is a result of some corrupt private-public partnerships involving our governor of California, who was mayor at the time. So we thought we'd do a sound piece, and we would sonify the data of this in real time of the tilting and sinking of the tower, and that we would then we would broadcast the data sonification out to the city and to the financial district, and also to the financial district, and then to Little Italy, which is adjacent to the San Francisco Art Institute, which commissioned the work. So we had this thing going, and what we decided to use for data sonification, and anyone who's ever done that before, it's entirely arbitrary. You can use any sound you want to sonify data. It's just, so we decided, because of the anxiety, we would use ASMR. It'd be like therapy. And then this therapy would shoot out to the city every day at happy hour. Like the first minute of happy hour, 5 o'clock, 5:01, la, you're such a good person and so smart. And people listen to you all the time. All those affirmations. I got a sample, and this is it. But SFAI, San Francisco Art Institute, has had some trouble. Financially, they are kind of no longer. So the piece is getting moved. And this year will be reset at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. And we will literally be like 3 blocks from the tower now. So we'll be able to blast both of our speakers at that tower. And these just aren't any speaker. These are long-range acoustic devices. LRADs. These are sonic weapons. They can shoot a signal will break your eardrums 7 miles. Not kidding. Like a sine tone. Boom. A simple tone. Also carries a voice really well. Doesn't do really good with hip hop music or heavy music, doesn't have much low end. But it uses hyperdirectional technology. It uses very high, super high frequency to carry the signal. And it doesn't have a resonator. Your body becomes a resonator, or a body. Whatever that signal hits, whether it's architecture or shrubs or whatever, that becomes a resonator. Then you will hear it more clearly. Otherwise, you just hear this kind of tinny, mysterious signal, So we can't blast it very loud at where SFAI is, because that's like one of the Russian Hill. It's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in all of San Francisco. They have threatened to sue us and blah, 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 blah. So, and its new home at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, we won't have those restrictions. So this piece is really going to come to life finally this year, and we're really excited about it. But here's the sound, and this concludes my talk. That's like from rubbing styrofoam balls, doing that with it. Yeah. Oh, this is real. Actually, this was from November 10th, 2019, this recording. Every day it's different. It evolves. Every day we get data. It's real. Oh yeah, we have all the chakra tones, all the chakra frequencies. We've got some whales music and stuff. We got all that new age on lockdown. Birds. Yeah. So this plays for 4 minutes every day, 5 o'clock. It's down now, but we're moving it. But yeah, that's the humpback whale. Transferred from vinyl. Yeah. Self-care, right? That is an outcropping of neoliberalism. Without working our asses into the ground and not being able to share time with our families or be anywhere where we should be doing the things we should be doing, you do this instead. Put on earphones and try to sleep and sleep away the stress. All right, that's good. That's the top.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to put these guys on the screen. So Zoomies, I'm gonna put you up in the room. So you're visible if you want to be visible. Please feel free to turn your cameras on. It's as close to being in the room as we can manage. Look at that.
You did good.
So we're gonna open it up to questions. Zoomies, hi Kelly. wonder if there's a way to, anyway. Okay, so if you are on Zoom and you want to ask a question, just type the word question in the chat. I think actually Nicole's gonna do it. No, Kozar's gonna do it. Okay, just type the word question in the chat, and you can either then, as you come up in the queue, we'll call you up, or you can post-COVID brain. It's not going so well. You can either type your question in the chat, or I'll call on you, or Kade will call on you, and you can speak right into your mic. But we'll start by opening it up to the room.
All right.
Daniel, and then Jude.
Can you tell me what the correlation is between the syncage data and the sound? When you get, what's the shape of the data and how are you correlating them?
It's very arbitrary. The data is just coming in when data is released. That data is privately kept and monitored, but they do have a special manager at the court to hold parties accountable. There were over 100 lawsuits over this that have since been settled. So they have an agreement, they're working out, they're fixing it, but the data comes in like it's, let's say, a 1/4 inch. You know, how that shapes the sound is it adds density, and like the more this thing sinks, the greater the data is on sinking and tilting, the more dense it gets, the more harsh it gets, and the more desperate the aspirational, what do you call it? Those things, daily aspirations get, yeah.
So have you set up a mathematical ratio?
Oh yeah, this is done on like, you know, it's ran by a software done in Max Patch written that crunches the data. We have thousands of samples, and what it does is it, you know, randomly picks a sample that's based on the criteria that we set based on the data. So while it's so arbitrary to set up a system like that, once you get it, you know, established, it's very methodical and predictable. Yeah. Does that help? Okay.
Simple technically.
Jude, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you effort that ends up coming together to form these things, because that's so interesting, and I enjoyed that you talked about how like angle it is to be like that individualistic idea and how it really like appreciate. Anyway, I was curious about what you find if you find that individuals and their collectives kind of end up fulfilling a certain task, like say there's one person who's really good at negotiating, other people that's not, or if there's like a skill that you found you brought to the team specifically that that you found out, or like something that you took away just by being around other people.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I didn't address that up front. I should have. We work on everything together, right? If I'm editing video, Chris Soball's, you know, in the chair next to me. I might be driving the computer, but you know, he's equally making decisions. Same thing, like if he's writing a Max Patch, he's driving the computer, and I'm making suggestions, and we're developing it together. But we don't do anything away from each other. We don't assign tasks. I think there's been times to where we get into a time crunch, and it's like, hey, can you do that real quick? You know, we just got to get that done, you know, and it'll break down, you know, our idealism will break down for a bit, but those are just for immediate, quick problem solving things, like when we're installing in an institution or something, or what have you. But for the most part, I mean, literally over 90% of the work is done by everyone, you know, at the same time. We're not the most prolific group of artists, you know, at Postcommodity. I wouldn't call Postcommodity prolific because our work takes so much time to do. So we've chosen a process of working that matches the type of work that we do, which is slow and deliberate and patient, you know. And in terms of like negotiating, you know, I'm Cherokee and we're like, you know, thought of as, you know, good negotiators, probably bad negotiators. We got kicked out of Georgia and Tennessee and ended up in Oklahoma. But, you know, a lot of people think that we're, you know, good at talking or whatever. We have the gift of gab or whatnot. We're a talking tribe, you know, like a lot of tribes, quiet, like Navajos won't say anything. Go hunting with a Navajo, you might have 2 sentences to share. With Cherokee, it's like nonstop talking. We just are that way. That's how we're wired. So maybe that might help in some negotiating or something, but you know, diplomacy is really important in what we do. And right now, there's just 2 of us. Cristobal is, you know, he has a PhD in social linguistics and rhetoric. And, you know, I worked 20 years in public policy working on, you know, American Indian tribal policy, you know, in DC and throughout the United States. So, you know, we do have like very particular skill sets for putting a proposal together and lobbying to realize it. You know, we're really, I don't know if anyone can match us, you know, because we don't have a gallery behind us. Like, let's say we were in a blue chip gallery, Hauser and Wirth, the brand, their lawyers would be negotiating. We wouldn't even be doing that negotiation. We would be present maybe, but, you know, but since we don't have that, we're really, everything that we have and built, we had to do through our own intentions and actions and discipline and patience, you know. And it's been nice. That's why the work's so diverse. You know, if you're a gallery artist, you can't like really develop a collector base with such, you know, varied work. Real hard. Oh yeah.
It's great. So sorry.
She'll start calling you Ruth.
I know.
That's an inside joke I heard about.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit questions going around, but I'm curious about how ideas come out when you're collecting. I know that places and sites are crucial to the work that you're involved in. I'm really fascinated by the sound piece that you saw, and I'm just wondering if you can elaborate more on how the seeds of ideas come about if you're working with a group of people, and I don't know, I guess there must be tons of different ways that happens. I hope you as well.
Yeah, that's an area that I think requires a lot of patience and a lot of discipline and trust. You know, like when there is 4 of us working at one time there's 5 of us.
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask you too about where you were as like an individual artist coming into what families as well.
Oh, okay, I'll answer this one first and go back to that. I kind of got lost. what was the first part of the question again?
I guess,
Oh yeah, how do we get the ideas on the table? It's just like brainstorming, drinking, you know, hanging out, like you know, really just being humans and talking. And neither one of us are, we're all, one thing that comes like Postcommodity is always filled with cynical people. Like we're all very cynical. And so we don't have this belief that like there's this genius or ideas come from the Lord Jesus Christ or, you know, whatever, you know, like you just talk about it and you just work on it and you just keep at it. And so what we have is this system to where we'll be talking, and if an idea comes out of a conversation, we file that idea. We send an email out to our inbox. That's our studio, is our inbox. And that it becomes a record. Like, okay, there's an idea. Then one of us will put that idea into our, Google Drive and file it there. So it's kept. And then we go back to it. And once the idea makes it into the Google Drive, then it's fair game. Like whatever anyone says to change that idea and to add to it, the originator of the idea cannot stop that from happening. That's the agreement. We cannot impede the development of an idea. That keeps the egos in check big time. There's no ownership of an idea. Like I did this, I did that. We may have been drunk and you said something stupid that we laughed our asses off and somehow it ended up in the Google Drive. We came back 6 months later and worked on it together and then made it an interesting piece. You can't say that that was your idea necessarily, because from the time it gets to the Google Drive to the time it gets into an exhibition, it's so vastly different. It's vetted out, it's complex, it's hopefully it's built into a container of ideas. And that's what we really see our artwork as. It's a container of ideas. We're not obsessed with aesthetics or having something look just right or blah, blah, blah. I actually don't care at all about aesthetics. I don't care about what anything looks like. I just want it to be able to like have a basket that can carry water and I can hand it to you. You can drink out of it and hand it to the person next to you and they could drink out of it. That's what I think art is, and that's, so we're never caught up in, things that can sidetrack people like feasibility. We don't care if it's feasible. We'll still give it a shot, or we don't have the money to do it. We'll just keep working on it until a commissioning opportunity comes along. So mainly it's like keeping the idea alive and growing it and building it until a commissioning opportunity comes across. Then it gets locked down. And then we go at it through the implementation process. But what's great is by the time we have a commissioning opportunity, those ideas are fully vetted and ready for showtime, and that, I think that's what's really important for us, at least, is to always have a data bank of bad ideas to turn into good containers for ideas. That's it's a really fun part, really fun process collaboratively when you have that much freedom. And what'll happen is it becomes part of a Word doc, a Google Doc. And then one day you look at the Google Doc, it's like one thing, and then you look at it another time, it's like, oh shit, we're working on this now. And it's really nice to see the evolution like that over time. And in terms of like my art practice, before I came into the art world as a writer, as a poet, and I think all of my art was text-based, back in the late 90s, and mid 90s, but mainly just poetry, you know, writing fiction, writing poetry, making noise music, you know, stuff like that. And then I learned enough about art because I grew up in Bakersfield, California, which doesn't really have museums or any kind of art stuff. It's real blue collar. It's where people go to work. They don't go to think about things. They go to work, you know, and that's kind of place I grew up. So I didn't know anything about art until I went to college and went to University of Oklahoma, which isn't really an art center either. But I had a professor there, Edgar Heapabirds, who's a baller Indian artist. He's Cheyenne Arapaho, and a wonderful mentor, really generous with his time and his ideas. And he made me realize what I was doing was really art, you know, like, because I was doing text and doing public work with text, making signs and placing them in environments and things like that, and do like public social works, and not really thinking of them as art. And he talked me into the fact that, oh, that is art. That's the kind of shit I do. I thought that's why you wanted to study with me, you know? And I was like, I didn't even know what you did. I just heard of you. You're my professor, you know? Because I didn't know who he was before. You know, it's embarrassing. I didn't. And so I think it was that. And the first thing I went is where most artists go who can't paint, go straight to video. And I started working with video, and then I never looked back. And sculpture came along, and you know, a lot of it's getting comfortable in your skin, doing things that people consider not labor but art, you know, and getting comfortable in your skin. And once you get comfortable in that skin, you can do anything. It doesn't matter because people are already calling it art. So you just keep hacking away at it, and that's kind of where I was. Before Postcommodity, I had only had 2 museum exhibitions in my life before Postcommodity, and everything else is like small DIY, you know, spaces or art run spaces and things like that. So it wasn't until 2006 when I had my first museum show, and then a big museum show after that, 2008. And Yazi was in that same show. And we're like, we got to stop doing this shit and just do Postcommodity. Because if there's a show in 2008, they brought us together in 2006 to submit our work. We all met each other, and, you know, I knew the curator, well, one of the curators, and that's how we all get exhibitions. You know your curator. Yeah. Oh yeah. But I knew one of the curators, and then, you know, that gave me some footing, you know, that was, I think, really important. But I think we all had a little cachet. You know, Yazi definitely had serious cachet. He's a very hot painter at that time, you know, and I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Yazi's painting, but he's, in my opinion, he's one of the great American Indian painters, you know, period. It's amazing. He's just a father and does not give a shit about the art market, you know, or galleries or anything like that.
The eyes are like witnesses of terrible situations happening to immigrants in the border. Are those eyes currently open or are they closed? And if that is the case, what did you observe with those eyes? Did you discover something new about immigrants' experiences?
The eyes are in boxes, packed away some of them are in a storage unit in New Mexico, and some of them are at Janae Sanchez's cafe in storage upstairs. We wanted to keep all the balloons that were in Mexico with Janae Sanchez. She's a spiritual steward of the project. So she's keeping that power with her. We've sold a couple balloons. So there's one of them is in the, what do you call it? The Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. So it's on permanent display there. Otherwise, you know, you can't help but learn from that experience. What you learn are no one's innocent. That's the first thing you learn. The people you think are your closest allies might not be your allies at all. And it's a life and death situation. Organized crime wins out and profits the most and exploits the most. People who are mestizo, who have tears in them waiting to come out, indigenous tears. They just need an opportunity to share those tears with other mestizo people. They need I learned that big time. That was heavy. Also you could be an immigrant and still know more about art than people from Bakersfield. The Mexican immigrants that I shared time with in particular, art was such an important part of their life, and storytelling and visual culture. It really blew me away. They're always trying to give us gifts. They just make something, just fashion something out of nothing, it seems like, and just to share. And so I guess what I learned is the deep sense of humanity and the power of that shared struggle, but also the power of the disappointment when they arrive and realize that all the lies they've been told about how great this place is that they're trying to get to, it's like the rug gets pulled out from under them. And so there's a great myth in the Americas that leads to that southern border. And I'm not sure what that myth is in service to. I didn't learn that because it's clearly in service to organized crime, to corporations, to federal governments. But that's obvious, I never really understood what that myth was really doing. I think you'd have to be an immigrant going through that process to understand that. But one thing is they've all crossed a line. They've all put their lives on the line for an idea. And this idea that, maybe my children will be better off than me or something like that, And I don't know if you ever look someone in the eyes that has done that. It's different than looking in the eyes of someone like me. I've never done that. So it's humbling. It's very powerful. They can see through you in some ways, and that they've put it all on the line. And that sounds like a Christian metaphor. I put it all on the line for the Lord, but I don't know what they're really putting all on the line for. Is that myth, and so it's real dark and tragic. to see. And we thought about the repellent fence as a portal. We worked on it eight years, but it was only up for 4 days. That's it. It was a ceremony. That's how we're Indians. We do stuff like that. There's people prepare for ceremonies their whole lives, and they happen so quickly, and what you have is a transformation. The exigency never goes away. The transformation helps you rationalize that exigency. And I think those might be some of the things that I've learned, but it was a deep, heavy spiritual process. There were a lot of tears shed and a lot of hugs and a lot of smiles. And God, those immigrant service organizations, largely Christian, the work they do is unbelievable, unbelievable. They're also sacrificing every day to promote public safety, but I think that's what I learned more than anything is there's this myth and we're all connected to it. And maybe none of us knows what it's in service to. And people arrive at that point expecting to know what it's in service to, expecting to be delivered into something. And oh my God, where do you go? LA? It's like a cesspool. God, there are better countries to run to than the United States, that's for sure. But it's tough. Yeah. Oh, well, it was like a ceremonial framework, 4 days. It's also a pragmatic framework. Helium is outrageously expensive. And it's also a pragmatic reason because the cartel gave us this land to use for a week. So we had to be in and out. We didn't have a choice in the matter. Yeah. Oh, you bet. You bet. Any other questions? All right. Any online? I guess that's it. All right. Well, thank you all very much.